Coming up on Talking Points, Russian forces have bombed major cities in Ukraine, but a limited ceasefire is now in effect. We'll have the latest on Russia's invasion and its consequences next.
Plus, New York State Republicans hold their annual convention. Find out who's running for major statewide offices on the GOP ticket.
And Florida passes a law banning abortions after 15 weeks. Find out how this legislation is different from that in Texas. Talking Points starts right now. Russian forces are targeting major Ukrainian cities, including Kharkiv and Mariupol. Welcome into Talking Points. I'm Chilekasi, Adele.
And I'm Teagan Brown. Thanks for joining us. Russian forces have surrounded Mariupol and started shelling the city on Saturday, 2 hours after a ceasefire went into effect. Russia has since announced another ceasefire, which went into effect today.
Talking Points analyst Moriah Humiston has more on how the conflict continues to unfold in Ukraine. Moriah.
Chilekasi and Teagan, thank you. The Russians and Ukrainians agreed to a ceasefire in the city of Mariupol on Saturday at around 10 a.m. Moscow time. Ukrainian civilians then began to evacuate the city. 2 hours after the ceasefire went into effect, the Russians started shelling the city, causing chaos and panic. Russian forces continue to surround Mariupol from all sides. They're also advancing northwest from the city of Kherson into the Ukrainian interior. There have also reportedly been explosions heard in the port city of Odessa. Russia has agreed to a limited ceasefire today, and officials on both sides are set to talk. They've also agreed to civilian evacuation corridors. In the north of the country, Ukrainian civilians were killed trying to flee the town of Irpin. Irpin is a suburb of Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. Now, if you want to take a look at the map right here, Russian forces are advancing on Kyiv from two sides. The main force is the convoy advancing south from the Belarus border, and that convoy has been plagued with logistical problems and Ukrainian drone attacks. There's also another force advancing west from the Russian border, and Ukrainian defenders in Kyiv are trying to prevent the Russians from surrounding the capital city on all sides.
So, Mariah, the Pentagon announced today that more troops will be deploying to Europe. What are the new details on this?
So the new details on this were released today that there will be 500 U.S. troops that will deploy to Europe. And there will also be troops from NATO, including from Poland, Romania, Germany, and Greece. And as of Monday, the senior defense officials say that there are 190,000 troops amassed along Ukraine's border that have been moved out of the country. Now, the big thing right now is that President Zelensky wants Ukraine to be a no-fly zone, but Western leaders are hesitant. Here's what Zelensky had to say about that.
Russian combat aircraft for all these terrorists. Make a humanitarian air zone without rockets, without air bombs. We are people, and it is your humanitarian duty to protect us.
Now, Mariah, Russia today announced a limited ceasefire, as you said before. What exactly does that mean?
So they said yesterday that the ceasefire would start this morning and that safe passages would open from civilians to the capital of Kyiv. And this came after President Volodymyr Zelensky delivered this speech on Friday in major European cities and talking about the Russian advances on Kyiv. Now, Zelensky urged people to leave, but he did say that if Ukraine falls, then everyone else will fall as well. Now, the big thing right now is that Secretary Antony Blinken is saying that this situation is going to get worse before this gets better. So in terms of the crisis right now, the number of war refugees that are fleeing Ukraine is the highest amount, over time, since World War II. And so what we're seeing with that is that people are fleeing as fast as possible, according to UN's refugee agency.
And now, you mentioned these people fleeing from Ukraine. We're actually seeing more than 1.5 million of these Ukrainians going to other countries to flee this Russian invasion. Do you think that we're going to see this number increase?
I think we will see the number increase. If it goes how it's been going for the past 10 to 12 days, we're seeing that those numbers are going up daily. And what Secretary Blinken said, that the situation is going to get worse, meaning more people are going to want to leave the country.
And we're seeing the number of refugees who are leaving Ukraine increasing, and almost seems by the day now. Something else that is going up, having effects on this country and all throughout the world, is gas prices. You know, take a look at the national average today, $4.14. Here in New York State, it's up 46 cents compared to last week, just over a 1 week period, according to AAA. Here in Syracuse, it's up 49 cents or so. We're continuing to see those prices go up.
Absolutely, and I mean, we've heard President Biden talk about this, you know, addressing what he's doing to take care of this, taking oil out of the reserves, but it's something that we're going to continue seeing him comment on. Something else that we're seeing is in Russia, the censoring of the media, including TikTok just came out and said that, you know, Russian content was being censored on there.
Absolutely, and we're seeing that with big tech giants, that this information war that's starting to happen because of Russian censorship and everything happening in Ukraine. Earlier today, TikTok put out a statement saying that they have to ban live streaming from people in Russia because of this fake news ban.
And it's not just TikTok, right? Over on Friday, Russia blocked access to Facebook, Twitter, and also that law that they imposed threatens jail time for up to 15 years for what the Russian government deems to be misinformation, the spreading of disinformation. And we saw some media outlets there who have people there, like the BBC, temporarily shut down those operations because they're putting the safety, what they see as the safety of the journalists and the people who are working for them, over this law right now, and what could be the consequences of the law.
Yeah, and what we can see is that this is going to have a bigger impact the more days that these bans go on, because this isn't just impacting Russian leaders, these are impacting Russian civilians who may or may not agree with what is happening in Ukraine right now. So as that freezes, as Apple Pay freezes, as all of these amenities for creators and people freeze, we're going to see the impact that that will have on civilians and what this will have as the war continues.
Talking Points breaking news analyst Moriah Humiston. Thank you. Coming up after the break, find out what actions Congress is planning to take over in the conflict in Ukraine. Stay with us.
So good, guys. That was really...
1 in 5 American teenagers now has some type of hearing loss. Loud noise is the most common cause. Let's hear for life. Turn the volume down.
Wash your hands, avoid sick people, and touching your face. There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. Brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Here's to the straggly ones, the lopsided ones, the first ones, the I miss my beard ones. But hey, I look good with this ones. But no way he's grown that in a week ones. The black, brown, red, and gray ones. That one. The itchy ones. The never forgotten ones. The ones grown by Dad. The ones grown for Dad. The started late ones. The absolutely filthy ones. The drawn-on ones, the finger ones, the pin ones, the I nearly didn't do it this year ones, and the yeah, why not ones. They all raise awareness, raise funds, start conversations, and save lives. Because whatever you grow will save a bro. Learn more at Movember.com.
Welcome back to Talking Points. Congress is discussing humanitarian and military aid options for Ukraine. The Biden administration is asking Congress for $10 billion.
Most lawmakers are showing support to provide relief to Ukraine. Here to break down aid options Congress is considering is Talking Points congressional analyst Dominic Chiappone. Dominic.
Thanks, guys. Currently, right now, Congress is considering a multitude of options to help the people of Ukraine. And the real question is, how will their plans conflict or add on to those of President Zelensky? Starting off right here with a congressional proposal that is currently on the table, a good amount of it has been 50-50 when it comes to both military aid and humanitarian aid. Right here, 48% of recent funding has gone to investing in defending the Pentagon, and an additional 43% has gone on to all humanitarian aid. So we've already already seen right now, currently, is that there's been a balance between providing both humanitarian and military support for Ukraine. Now, an interesting development that we have seen with this Ukrainian conflict has been how much things have escalated in just a short period of time. Just about a week ago, on February 25th, there was around a $6 billion proposal for aid. As of now, that stands at close to double that at just over $10 billion. So once again, we're seeing with Congress that there is an escalation with this Ukrainian conflict, and that in turn is impacting what is going to be passed. So currently right now you could see that 98% of the House of Representatives formally approved a resolution to back Ukraine. And additionally, there's been a Senate bill that was proposed on January 28th that provides three main things. Number one, financial support for the people of Ukraine. Number two, doing things in Ukraine and Eastern Europe to prevent Russian influence. And number three, the deterrence overall of recent Russian military aggression. But you can see right here at this map that Ukrainian forces have already been dealing with a lot with Russian invasions through Belarus, through the eastern side of Russia, and of course through the Crimean underside. The bottom line is that time is of the utmost essence for Ukraine and any sort of congressional response, and Congress needs to ask itself what type of aid it's going to pass, how much, and most importantly, what is ending up going to be passed.
So, Dominic, how has Congress's view of the invasion changed recently?
The simple answer is the sentiment itself has not changed, but what has changed is the number of congressmen who are in support of Ukraine, particularly from the Republican side. Recently, Representative Victoria Spartz spoke out, and she is Ukrainian herself and has family in Ukraine, and she gave a very powerful statement recently. Take a listen.
He is not going to stop. He is going to go further. And then we'll have to send our children to die to fight this.
And now, Dominic, you know, Zelensky, of course, the president of Ukraine, has spoken out recently in past weeks asking different countries for things. What has he asked President Biden for specifically?
An interesting part of this debate has been the demands of President Zelensky and how that conflicts or contradicts the demands wanting that Congress wants to pass. So, for instance, a big thing that President Zelensky has asked for is the establishment of a no-fly zone over the country of Ukraine. He's also called upon a total ban of all oil imports coming from Russia, which, by the way, does have bipartisan support from members of Congress here in the United States. He's also asking for more direct military aid, and this comes with rockets, planes, drones, different things along those lines, and then the continuation of economic sanctions on Russian people. But the big thing, though, right now is that a lot of those proposals aren't actually in the bills being passed by Congress right now. The Senate bill that I just mentioned earlier was open for discussion on January 28th, and we're in March right now, and nothing has gotten done. And this recent House resolution was passed just 5 or so days ago, and those proposals are also not in it. So what we're seeing right now is that, number one, that there's a huge escalation of this conflict, and Congress is just lagging behind. And number two, they can only do so much within this situation as it stands.
So you mentioned that you say they can only do so much. How is Congress's role limited in providing any sort of relief to Ukraine?
The biggest thing that we're seeing right now is just the historical impact and precedent set by the executive branch. We have seen in the 21st century, especially when it comes to international affairs, the executive branch, aka the president, the Department of Defense, you name it, has had more of an influence and more of a say over the policy actually being implemented. You have to remember that at the end of the day, Congress is just one legislative branch within an entire country dealing with an international issue. They are limited by both the Constitution and by historical precedent in what they can do, what they can pass, and how they can help the Ukrainian people. What's going to be interesting is, number one, do they try to take back some of those influences? Because the only way they could do that would be more economic sanctions or the nuclear option, a declaration of war. Or number two, does anything get passed in the first place? Because things have been up for discussion. I mean, Nancy Pelosi recently said that they want to pass something this week, but promises have been made before, and those promises have not been kept. And the important thing here is that Ukrainian lives are at risk for this situation.
Talking Points analyst Dominic Chiappone, thank you.
You have Ukrainian immigrants that already live in Syracuse, right? And they're a key part of our community, and they add a lot of vitality to the city. So to the extent that we can be a place of refuge for people that are coming here, I think that's great and only adds to our city. And it's a humanitarian issue that
That was Syracuse Common Councilor at Large Michael Green. City officials want to accept Ukrainian refugees in the central New York area.
State officials, including Governor Hochul, are also announcing actions to help Ukrainians and put economic penalties on Russia. Talking Point's New York State analyst Olivia Maniscalco and City of Syracuse analyst Tyler O'Neill join us to tell about how the state is supporting Ukrainians in need. Now, Tyler, let's start with you. With so many people fleeing Ukraine as refugees, how are they being welcomed here, in the state of New York, specifically in Syracuse?
Right, so they are being welcomed with open arms here. There already is a strong Syracuse Ukrainian base here. There are many people living here in this culture, so they're ready to be welcomed. They're working with resettlement partners such as the Catholic Charities, Interfaith Works of CNY, as well as the state of New York to make sure they're welcomed here. As we heard before, the Common Councilor at Large, Michael Green, he's ready to welcome there and wants them to be in central New York.
Now, what is being done to support these Ukrainian refugees that may come over, that may relocate to central New York?
Right, so Mayor Ben Walsh, as well as Onondaga County Executive Ryan McMahon, wrote a letter to President Joe Biden on Wednesday stating they want to bring him here. In that letter, they wrote that our community has long been home to the largest Ukrainian population of the United States. The rest of the letter, they basically addressed that they're ready to welcome here, and here's what they said here. The experience makes central New York an ideal location where Ukrainian citizens can find shelter on a short-term basis until they can return to their homes or settle permanently to be free of unjustified violence and war.
And now, Olivia, I would like to shift to you as our New York State analyst. Let's speak a little bit about the governor. What has Kathy Hochul said, to support, what has Governor Hochul done about the impact of Russia?
Yeah, well, like Tyler was mentioning, New York State has a pretty large Ukrainian population. There's about 140,000 people of Ukrainian ancestry, and there's only about over 1 million in the United States, so a lot of them are in New York. So a couple days after the invasion, Governor Hochul signed an executive order basically forbidding her state from doing business with Russia, canceling investments there. And she has said she wants to make sure that no New York State taxpayer money is going into anything indirectly with Russia. Now there's also the question of, do sanctions really work in this situation? And in terms of New York State sanctions, they do work more than other states because a lot of Russian investments do come from New York City, but sanctions in general, they don't just hit right away. They're not just going to hit the Russian economy right off the bat. So they will take a little bit to work, but because sanctions do, like I was just saying, take a little bit, there's more that is trying to be done. Actually, New York's $280 billion pension fund includes nearly $111 million in investments from Russian companies. So that is being reviewed by the Comptroller of New York, who is Thomas P. DiNapoli. And then along with that, the New York State Retirement Fund, which is one of the biggest public pension funds in the United States, that is being reviewed as well.
Olivia and Tyler, thank you so much. Coming up after the break, we'll keep it right here in New York State as Republicans hold their annual convention. Stay with us.
The COVID-19 pandemic has taken a toll on all of us. But for those who have a history of adverse childhood experiences, this may be a particularly difficult time.
Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, are traumatic events that happen to us as children, yet can impact us for a lifetime.
And I want you to know there are some resources that can help. Visit numberstory.org for tips on helping yourself and your children.
Unlike other health concerns, mental illness is not always easy to see.
Third line, please.
DEPRESSION.
Mental illness doesn't show up on a scale. Bipolar? Sorting out a mental health concern is not something to attempt on your own.
Anxiety. I thought so.
Like many health conditions, help for mental illness takes professional diagnosis and treatment. And the sooner you seek treatment, the better.
Look at that. 6,000 steps and PTSD.
If you or a loved one has a mental health concern, don't go it alone. Find out what to do. For 24-hour free and confidential information and treatment referral, call 1-800-662-HELP. Learn more at samhsa.gov/support.
Welcome back to Talking Points. New York State Republicans held their annual convention last week on Long Island.
The party officially nominated candidates for multiple statewide offices for November's elections. Talking Points campaign trail analyst Jake Morel is here to tell us more about who was nominated. Now, Jake, the most important part of this convention relating to the campaign trail is the nomination. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, thanks, Teagan. So the state Republican Party has been backing Long Island Representative Lee Zeldin for months now in this race, actually since he announced his campaign. So it was no surprise when they nominated him officially at the state GOP convention last week.
So, Jake, Zeldin is somebody who's kind of known throughout the New York State political scene, the New York State Republican political scene. Do you think there's any other Republicans in this race with a shot at the primary nod?
Yeah, so actually just a month ago, we saw that Andrew Giuliani, son of former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, was actually very close with Zeldin in polls, especially in New York City, which is a very important place to win these primaries. But Giuliani vowed to still compete in this race after not getting the nomination at the GOP convention. And he also gave a little bit of a fiery speech talking about President Trump, saying President Trump has not been invoked at all in a Republican convention. Giuliani was not happy about this, as he is a former Trump official himself, so he does not want to see sort of Trumpism politics get taken out of New York State Republican politics. Now, his father, Rudy, was also there, and Rudy is also a former Trump administration official. Now, Rudy said, and I quote, "Screw the Republicans, a bunch of jerks," talking about his own party. So we're definitely seeing a lot of, discourse between the Republican Party at this convention.
And now you mentioned the former president. Is there any reason that they're not really talking about Trump, even though he still is such a big figure in this party? As you're talking about the Giulianis, talking about Trump, still mentioning him, is there a reason that he's really not been mentioned by the others?
Absolutely. So the Republicans have not won a statewide seat since 2002. It's been 20 years since they've controlled New York. So to win this election, they're looking to be a little bit more bipartisan leading. As we know, President Trump is a very conservative figure and is an especially controversial figure among Democratic voters. So the state Republicans don't exactly want to associate with him if they're going to try and get those swing votes and those Democrat votes. There was a lot of mention of COVID laws and crime rates at this convention, which are two issues they feel they can take a strong conservative stance on, but still get a lot of those swing votes and some of those Democrat votes.
And I think we're seeing those in terms of not only just New York State, but those same kind of themes in terms of politics and themes of running across the nation as well. Talking Points analyst Jake Morel, thank you. The Florida State Legislature has passed a bill that will ban abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. Many are calling the Republican-backed bill one of the strictest in the country.
Governor Ron DeSantis is expected to sign the bill into law soon. Here with more on what this could mean for access to abortion is Talking Points analyst, healthcare analyst, Julianna Distante. Juliana?
Thanks, guys. This bill will allow exceptions to that 15-week cutoff in cases of, quote, serious risk to the mother and fatal fetal abnormality. However, the bill will not allow exceptions in cases of rape or incest. The new legislation takes 9 weeks off the time to get an abortion in the state. Florida joins Mississippi in setting a 15-week cutoff time. This means that the two have the second strictest abortion bans in the country. Texas has the strictest laws on the books. Its ban is set at 6 weeks. Their bill also does not allow exceptions for rape or incest. Lawsuits are pending for that Texas law over whether or not it violates the U.S. Constitution. That case is currently at the Texas State Supreme Court. If appealed, then the case could be heard by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Now, Juliana, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis said that this would be signed into law soon. Are we seeing any other states, sign things similar to this or propose them?
That's right, Teagan. Now we're seeing the state of Texas and we saw Mississippi. We're cutting back and we're cutting weeks off of the time of which we will allow, states will allow abortions in the state, like I've said. Now this is going to be something very interesting to keep up with, and we see Ron DeSantis did comment on this recently. He said this is a late term. These are protections for babies that have heartbeats, that can feel pain. I think the protections are warranted. He has expressed that he will sign this bill in very short order when it is presented to him, and that it is very likely that it will be passed soon.
Julianna, abortion, of course, one of those issues in America that still, if you are for it, you're very strong on it. If you're against it, you're also very strong on it. It's a very polarizing issue in America. But what actions are pro-abortion groups taking in response to this legislation?
That's right, Chile. There's blowback in the state of Florida, as well as we're seeing federal figures like the president and vice president tweeting about this as well. We see Vice President Kamala Harris tweeted, "This bill is extreme by any standard. The right of women to make decisions about their own bodies is non-negotiable." The Democrat Party, as well as Democrats in the Florida legislature, did speak on their opposition to this bill passing, but with a Republican majority in this Florida state legislature, it is very expected that that bill did pass.
And Juliana, finally, what does this bill mean for the Supreme Court decision of Roe v. Wade?
That's right. Now, this decision in conjunction with Texas and Mississippi is something very interesting. We're seeing that in a very flat-out way contradicts Roe v. Wade. Now, this is going to be something interesting to take a look at across the nation as we see these different cutoffs. Now, we can see the abortion cutoff time by state across the nation is very stark. We're seeing Texas and Mississippi at 6 weeks, 15 weeks. We're seeing that Florida will eventually, if signed by Ron DeSantis, of course, will be signed and joining Mississippi. And we're going to see this changing over time, and the Supreme Court is going to eventually make that decision.
Talking Points healthcare analyst Julianna Distante. Thank you. Coming up after the break, China has been watching events in Ukraine closely. Find out how the Russian invasion could affect their plans next.
Welcome to my house. Everybody's pretty tired of each other. The walls were closing in. If this sounds like your house, try going someplace new. YourLifeYourVoice.org. It could help you find a little more breathing room.
Put the keys down, Kevin. But I'm gonna drive home. There are several warning signs present that you shouldn't be driving.
I've taken 25 selfies in the last 10 minutes.
26.
Yep, I'm definitely gonna call a ride home.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Talking Points. China has been closely watching the Russian invasion in Ukraine. The communist leadership has long been interested in invading Taiwan. So, Teagan, we talk about how China has been trying to invade Taiwan. It's a conflict it's existed for almost more than 7 decades now. And the Chinese Communist Party, its president Xi Jinping, hasn't ruled out the use of force in what he calls a, quote, reunification between China and Taiwan. And the Chinese ambassador to the United States also says that there could be military conflict over this issue.
Yeah, so speaking of the United States, back in February on the 28th, the Biden administration actually sent an unofficial delegation of former U.S. defense and national security advisors to Taiwan as a signal of our commitment to them. And now, you know, with China seeing what Russia is doing, it could be something that they could look further into in the future.
Now, I think that's interesting, right? Because China, you're talking about how Russia kind of has its problems with NATO, what they see as an intrusion on their security territory, and China kind of sees that the same way as well. But we'll leave it there.
And that is all the time that we have for you on this episode of Talking Points. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CitrusTV News and like us on Facebook. I'm Teagan Brown.
And I'm Chilekasi, Adele. Take care and good night, Syracuse.